So today I want to talk through enclosures, and essentially what are certain things that are inside the enclosure that you need to help your spider thrive. So I essentially want to break it down into three different categories. So you got the bottom, you got the middle, you got the top. So I do have one of my enclosures here from Tarantula Cribs I've decorated. This is the medium treehouse switch. This is the one that has the removable top. Then it also has the front door for opening. This is probably the largest that you would need for a jumping spider. You can also go with a small treehouse switch. And that one would be good too for an adult jumping spider. So talking through the different parts of the enclosure. So you have the bottom. What do you need for the bottom? So what I like to do personally is I like to use reptile safe moss. So as you can see here is I have the moss down here on the bottom. I get this as a reptile, it's like called a crash pad. And this is something that sounds like a sheet. I'm able to cut it out to the size that I need. It has kind of like a plastic backing on there that holds the moss on there. But then I'm able to hot glue that onto the bottom. I've done it on the back side of the enclosures too. With it being a reptile safe moss is that it is something that is safe for your pets. You don't want to use hobby store moss. Hobby store moss is something that has extra dyes added to it to help it look greener, and give it different colors, mainly for crafts. But if you're misting your enclosure, the water will have the dyes seep out of the moss and will harm your spiders. So any moss that you do put in here, I would recommend doing pet friendly, going to a pet store, and getting moss that way. So the crash pad is something that I really like. You can get it at Petco or PetSmart. I usually have to look it up online. Not all stores carry it. I'm sure you can find it on other online retailers as well. So that's something that I really like to use. Comes in a big sheet, so I'm able to cut out the sections that I need. If I do little sections of it, it blends in pretty well. Like it doesn't look like you have seams for the moss. So I do really like that. So the nice thing too with adding the moss on the bottom is it helps retain moisture. So this will help with the humidity of your enclosure. And you need the humidity to help with their molting. So they don't need a lot of humidity. They don't need the high humidity, but they need enough so that way when they are molting that they are able to shed their exoskeleton. If you don't have enough humidity, there are chances of mismolts, and this is where you can unalive your spider. So you do want to make sure that you have something that is able to help retain moisture a bit. And another thing too is that you don't have to use the Repta sheets or anything like that to put on the bottom. You can do just loose moss on the bottom as well and like glue that in there if you want, or just place it in there. What I also like to do is I like to add different like decor pieces on top of the moss. So this I will hot glue on there. So I'll do like little benches, mushrooms, you can do rocks, any of the foliage that I get like different stores, like hobby stores. I take little bits and I hot glue it in there. This gives us different areas for the spiders to hide, to roam around on, to climb on. I've had some of them decide to make a hammock underneath like a bench. Just kind of gives them different areas to go explore. So plus it looks really cool. I mean, everyone loves the mushrooms, so adding all the little mushrooms in there is really cool. It's definitely, you can have a lot of fun with it. And then as far as the glue that I use for hot gluing anything in there is I use the Gorilla Glue brand for the hot glue. And I just find that this holds better with the humidity. So this is something I like. I don't really use E6000. That is something that I used to love for crafting, but the fumes on it are really strong and it's really hard to let that vent out enough. So if you use anything for gluing in there, you want to make sure that it vents out. Any of the fumes from the glues I use are toxic to the spider, will unalive them. So you want to be careful what you're putting in there. That's why I like the hot glue, is it doesn't have a lot of off-gassing. So you're able to put your spider within there. Honestly, probably before 24 hours, but I would do 24 hours just to be safe. But you probably really could do less than that. Any of the foliage that I really grab for the enclosures, I grab from different hobby stores, Michael's or whatnot. I make sure that if they're fabric or they look like they are softer material, I do wash them just to make sure that there's no dyes that leach out of them. You can if you want sealed like flowers. I don't necessarily seal any of my flowers. I don't know if it makes a difference. I haven't had issues, and I've been doing it for over a year now at this point, so I think it's okay. But again, if you feel that it would be safer, go for it. If you do seal any of your products that are going in there, I like to use what's called DuraClear, and it's a paint-on, and it is a paint-on product that seals and like gives like a clear coating over your product, so that way it is more water resistant, mildew resistant. You can do that with the different figurines as well. So anything that you put at the bottom of your enclosure, you do want to make sure that it's stable. If you happen to move your enclosure around, you want to make sure that it's not going to fall over and harm your spider. So I do want to, that's why I like to hot glue my things in there, is that way I don't have to worry about it coming off. So on the bottom of your enclosure, you can also do, instead of doing moss or the crash pad that I use, you can also do Bioactive. So this would be doing something more with soil. You can get the little, oh my gosh, I can't even remember the name of them. They're the little balls that go on the bottom to help with drainage. So essentially you need a drainage layer. I'll put the name up here of what they're called. I cannot remember for the life of me. And then you do a mesh, and then you would do soil, and then you can add like leaf litter, sphagnum moss to help retain moisture as well. That's where then you can add in springtails, cleanup crew to help with molding as well. And you can still add in fun decor, fun like 3D printed stuff or figurines that you get online. Like there's no harm in putting that. So you can do a whole like naturalistic look, or you can have some fun with it, do like maybe naturalistic and adding in some like different themed options that kind of stretch the bounds of naturalistic. So with Bioactive too is that you can also add in live plants. So take a pothos, take a cutting on it, stick it into the soil after like propagating, so getting like the roots to come down, put it in there. So you can do live plants, and just make sure any plant that you put in there is free of fertilizers and chemicals, and it'll be good to be in there with your spider. You may have to trim it every once in a while or like cut back if it's growing too much, but that is an option you can do with Bioactive, which is really cool. Then the next area that you want to focus on is the middle. So what I like to do is I use the 3D printed decor that we create ourselves. So I have like the mushroom here, you have the clouds, you can do tons of different like design type options. So for those that don't know, I do have an Etsy shop, and I have a ton of 3D printed decor that I design, and then my husband, he 3D prints them at home. We magnetize them. All the magnets are sealed within the print so that you don't have to worry about the magnets rusting or coming loose. But it's something that I really have a lot of fun doing, because you can do so many different themes with the 3D printed decor. So, and a lot of that is adding the ledges onto the middle parts of like the enclosure to give them areas to climb. So it really like, you can have a lot of fun with it. Other things you can put in there are bridges. So I've done like the cloud bridge, like the raindrops. I've done a leaf one for like maple leaves. Just recently did a Minecraft one with some bees. So you can have a lot of fun with it. It adds to the design. Will the spider use it? Sometimes. It really depends on the spider. I have caught some photos of them using the bridge. I have seen them on the ledges. I've had some, like I have a bookshelf, and I added some decor on top of the bookshelf, and it's one of the ones that's like the floating bookshelf. And I have one of my spiders, she had created a hammock inside, like between the acrylic and the decor. So it just gives them more areas to roam around on if they want to make it like a hammock area. It gives them anchor points. So that is a lot of fun. Another thing that you can also add to the sides of the enclosure for the middle are like web ribbon. So you'll see this a lot in the community, but it's essentially like it's polyacrylic web ribbon that looks kind of like webs, like spider webs. People also use this in the mantis community, but it's essentially a really nice ribbon to add to the side, gives it the aesthetic of webs, but is also adding areas for climbing. This is really good for elder spiders. When they get older, they lose their grippiness and on their paw pads. So when they're climbing, they'll slip. So I like to add in the web ribbon on the side. Helps with climbing, especially for those elder spoods. So I do like the web ribbon. We have an assortment of different colors that we offer too. You can get them online. Usually they come in big rolls. So, and you don't need much, but you just need to cut off sections. You can hot glue them in there on the sides. You can do magnets just to adhere them onto the side as well. Yeah. And you can also add in different foliage and leaves and branches and whatnot insides there too to help give them areas to climb. You don't have to use magnetic stuff. You can hot glue, just making sure that anything that's on the sides is secure. If it happens to fall, there is that chance of hurting your spider. Another thing I want to touch base on is that anything that you put in your enclosure that is porous, so like wood branches, wood pieces. I've done stuff like, let's see, little wooden platforms with magnets on them. That is again another thing that you're going to want to seal with like Duraclear, polyacrylic. That way it helps with preventing any mold or mildew. The mold will harm your spider, so you do want to make sure that it's protected. You can also do a bioactive enclosure and put those pieces in there, and if you do, just make sure you have a cleanup crew. So that's having springtails and isopods. Isopods, just keep an eye on them. I've had friends that have had spiders that have used those as meals. They won't eat the springtails because they're too tiny, but isopods, I have witnessed spiders eating those. And normally I would say that they wouldn't because the shells of the isopods are really hard. So it's a lot more work for the spider to go for them, but we have definitely had that. So if you see that your spider is just chowing down that, getting too chunky, I'd probably try to either relocate the spider into a new enclosure, or if you're able to take out the isopods, go for it. Like, I don't know how easy that really is. But with the bioactive and adding the wood pieces, having that cleanup crew will help prevent molding as well. So that is a nice thing if you're wanting to go for more naturalistic stance. So top the enclosure, this is where I really like the canopy of the trio switch from Tarantula Cribs, is that it has this nice little like cranny up here to have your hide. So I like to put like my hides right at the top. It creates a little like nesting area. If they don't use the hide that I put in there, like actually going inside, I usually see them if they create it behind the hide up in that little top part of the canopy, which is fun. But for the top part of your enclosure, essentially you really want to make sure you have a hide. This is giving it somewhere like a dark, cozy area for it to go and hide in, create its hammock, and that's where it's going to spend the majority of its time. Adding different clutter up there. So if you want to add, I've hot glued in like different leaves, different floral pieces that I've gotten from the stores, just different things that kind of help add stuff to the top. That way you don't want it too empty up there. Like they'll still web up there, but giving them more options to climb on and hide on up there. Since they spend the majority of their time up at the top, it makes more sense to have some clutter up there as well. And for the top of the enclosure too, is that you want to make sure, like if you have hides or anything like that at the top, you don't necessarily, like, you want to make sure that it's secure enough because you don't want that like the hides are going to move and damage the hammock that they're in. So the magnets that we use for the 3D printed items I make, we use really strong magnets so that way the print is secure to the enclosure. Don't have to worry about that if you open up the top, and you don't have to worry about the piece falling off or anything like that and hurting your spider, damaging their hammock and anything like that. Another thing that you can have for in the middle of your enclosure would be like feeding dishes. So it's not a necessary thing to have, but if you have a spider that maybe is stubborn and it needs a feeding dish kind of closer up to where it has its hammock, you can use the feeding dish to put a bug in there. Most feeding dishes aren't really escape proof. I know we do offer some, and I do put the disclaimer that they're not escape proof, but they do allow you for getting the food up by their spiders. So it does help kind of get that visual aspect for your spider, get the food up to them. Another thing you add either to the middle or to the top is doing a hygrometer. It is definitely not necessary. I mainly use them during the winter to track humidity because it does get like a lot drier out in around the Midwest. So it definitely gets a lot drier with having the heater on and it just being winter and drier. So the hygrometer will keep track of temperature and humidity. And you want that up close to where your spider's mainly at. Having it down the bottom is not going to help because it could be really humid down there, but the humidity is not getting up to your spider. So you want to make sure that wherever your spider is near, that's where you want to have the hygrometer at. That's why I normally specify that you want that at the top or like the middle. And we do offer with our 3D printed items, we have hygrometers and a holder that is magnetic, so that way you can put that up at the top or on the side of your enclosure as well. So that helps get that up off of the bottom of your enclosure and up by your spider. Again, hygrometer is not necessary, so it's really kind of up to you if you're deciding if you want to or not. I do find that it is nice to have at times, though, just to have on hand. I think that's essentially it for what you can have in your enclosure. And the main key things is that you want your products to be safe that are going in there. So sealing any items that are porous with Duraclear polyacrylic. And also when you do that stuff, make sure that you're venting it out. Make sure that you have something to help retain moisture. So whether that is reptile safe moss at the bottom, if you're doing bioactive and having soil and sphagnum moss to help with the retention of moisture, and then making sure that your pieces are secure. So whether that's from really strong magnets, gluing stuff in your enclosure, but just making sure it's safe. And I'd say give it enough space in areas for it to climb around and hide in, and it'll make your spider pretty happy. So other than that, I think that's it for how you would set up your enclosures. I have tons of examples over on my Instagram, on my Facebook. If you see any of the 3D printed items in any of my videos, go to my Etsy. I have tons of options. We do different colors for different types of things too, so it really can play to your theme, which is really fun. So I would definitely highly suggest that you go check those things out. Feel free to follow me on all my socials, so that way you can see all the new things that we're making, all the different things we do for the enclosures. It's really kind of what got me into jumping spiders, was all the fun things you can do with the enclosures and the different themes and decorating and all that. So you can really have a lot of fun with it. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. I appreciate you for staying to the end and watching all this. I want to say, how about you leave a comment below of what is your favorite theme to do for your enclosure. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. So have a great one. I will talk to you guys later. Bye.